We're proud to support the craft of journalism. UBS brings you the latest news from around the world with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Be part of an international network that brings together leading insights, research, and technology across 24 time zones and 12 key financial hubs, with you at the center of it all. UBS. Advice is our craft.
You're listening to The Globalist, first broadcast on the 11th of July 2025 on Monocle Radio. The Globalist, in association with UBS. Hello, this is The Globalist, broadcasting to you live from Midori House in London. I'm Georgina Godwin. On the show ahead...
To Washington, D.C. and to President Donald Trump, stay with us and stay with the Europeans. We are on the same page.
At the Ukraine Recovery Conference in Rome, the German Chancellor issued a heartfelt plea to the US as Europe commits billions to the reconstruction of the country. Then, 30 years after the massacre in Srebrenica, what lessons can we learn from the tragedy? We'll have a roundup of the day's papers and discover why the world's art connoisseurs are flocking to a Portuguese seaside town. Anti-Semitism in Australia has risen by 300% since the war in Gaza began. We'll look at the government proposals to counter this. We'll get the latest Hollywood buzz, and Andrew Muller will reveal what he's learned about the world this week. And finally...
The fans are really sensitive and smart, and they're obviously the best way of knowing, what music converts.
Charlotte Cardin, the Canadian singing sensation, tells us why her music has become the defining soundtrack of the summer. That's all ahead here on The Globalist, live from London. First, a look at what else is happening in the news. Donald Trump will impose a 35% tariff on Canadian imports from August, warning it could rise further if Ottawa hits back. Former South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has been jailed over last year's martial law attempt, facing charges that could carry the death penalty. And a prototype Hermes Birkin bag has sold at Sotheby's for a record £7 million to a Japanese collector. Do stay tuned to Monocle Radio throughout the day for more on those stories. Now, President Volodymyr Zelensky opened the 4th annual Ukraine Recovery Conference in Rome yesterday, alongside host Giorgia Meloni, with the latter announcing a pledge of €10 billion to aid the recovery of the war-torn country, at a time when Russia is stepping up aerial bombardment and support from the US looks shaky. There are over 5,000 participants at the conference, which continues today, including world leaders, representatives from the private sector, financial institutions and civic bodies. Well, Alexander Shushko, who's Executive Director of the International Renaissance Foundation, an open society network based in Kyiv, joins me now from the conference in Rome. Alexander, thanks very much for coming on the show. Can you tell us more about the 10 billion that's been pledged? And are these new funds? Where's the money coming from? And is it earmarked for a specific purpose?
Yeah, there are some... Hello. There are some significant financial commitments and further initiative declared. Including that 10 billion package. So this is certainly a very important initiative by the European Union, also announced yesterday by Ursula von der Leyen. And there is joint commitment of the European Union and a number of member states, including Germany, Poland, and some others. So there will be a pool of funds, and certainly details have to be announced soon, I think, and we will know more about all the sources. But anyway, it's a new commitment, it's a new arrangement, and there is also the plan of the European Union to commit even more for the next European Union financial perspective for the next 7 years. So we will see what exactly what will be the shape of this fund. But certainly there is the acknowledgement by the world leaders who gathered yesterday in Rome that they need work together in order to contribute to resilience and further recovery of Ukraine.
Is using frozen Russian assets part of the discussion?
Yes, of course. And yesterday, Ursula von der Leyen also said that the EU already sent Ukraine 1 billion just a few weeks ago from this resource, from the income generated by Russian frozen assets. It's continuing discussion how either there is an opportunity to confiscate not only the income but these funds frozen themselves. So there are discussions in the EU, and there is not enough clarity on this matter. I understand that Ukraine insists that there is a time now not just to freeze, but to confiscate entirely Russian frozen assets. And so there are ongoing debates on that.
So the event also hosted a high-level session of the Coalition of the Willing, where 32 representatives from allied countries and organisations, including US delegates, agreed to establish a headquarters in Paris and finalise plans for future security support. What does that mean? Does it mean boots on the ground?
Oh, so there is a debate on this. So, yes, as far as I understand, the leaders of the coalition of Willing discuss the possible opportunity of deploying troops. But this is initiative, as far as we understand, for the period after the ceasefire agreement signed. So the question is, so this is the initiative how to keep peace, but once it's signed. So this is the more challenging issue, how to reach any peace agreement. But anyway, this is a positive movement when there are some practical arrangements under possible, or even hypothetically possible, deployment of peacekeeping forces.
So Donald Trump's now reversed his decision to cut weapons supplies to Kyiv, but is the US seen as an honest broker? How far can Ukraine rely on help from the White House? And what did Merz say, Chancellor Merz?
Yeah, you know that Donald Trump probably sincerely believes that he can negotiate peace with Putin. But he made a lot of attempts already. They made 6 phone conversations with Putin, and also his envoy, personally, Steve Witkoff, 4 times visited Russia. Unfortunately, practical outputs of this efforts are not so big. So Putin, in fact, rejected all Trump's proposal to proceed to the ceasefire, to the peace agreement. So at this moment, Donald Trump feeling upset that his efforts not so effective as he expected. And so that is why he changes his rhetoric regarding Putin. And so we just wait for what would be his next step. Either he still has illusions on Putin or maybe not.
So will the thorny subject of EU accession be addressed?
Yes, every one of the leaders of the EU who spoke yesterday, all of them underlined that the Ukrainian future is in the European Union, and Ukraine has a path to the accession. And certainly there is a problem today with Hungary. And the Hungarian government is blocking opening the chapter for negotiations with Ukraine. And you know, there should be a unanimity in the European Union for any steps forward. But yes, this is a challenge as of today. But all the leaders here, including Ursula von der Leyen and Giorgia Meloni and Chancellor Merz, and Donald Tusk, all they stressed that the core idea for Ukrainians' modernization and further development and stability is European Union accession. And certainly in Ukraine, there is still a big enthusiasm on this. And we hope this process not to be stalled. Otherwise, there will be disappointment in Ukrainian society. So yes, there is a big idea. And we hope it will proceed, and there will be no stagnation on accession.
And Alexander, excuse me, with Ukraine under renewed attack by Russia's drones and missiles, is it premature to talk of recovery? I mean, what sense are you getting from the Ukrainians at the conference? Is there hope?
Yes, of course. Many people say that recovery may be not the perfect term of all these discussions, because mostly the matter is rather about resilience and the ability of Ukrainian society to sustain, to keep resistance. So rather than post-war recovery, because war is continuing, and unfortunately there is no perspective to finish it soon, unfortunately. So it's rather, I would differentiate two components. One of them is the current resilience of Ukraine in terms of economy, social resilience, military resilience, and its ability to keep fighting. And more distant prospects also needed. I mean, there is a debate on the longer-term horizon for Ukraine about the strategy of development, which is also needed in order to keep society mobilized. So I think a combination of those two, short-term resilience and longer-term modernization perspective, is exactly behind the main stage of the conference here.
Alexander, thank you very much indeed. That's Alexander Shushko speaking to us from Rome. And this is The Globalist. Bosnia and Herzegovina is marking the 30th anniversary of the Srebrenica massacre. Around 8,000 people, mostly Bosniak Muslim men and boys, were systematically murdered by Bosnian Serb forces in 1995. But contemporary politicians are using the commemorations to stoke divisions. Well, Monocle's correspondent in the Balkans, Guy Delorne, is in Srebrenica and following commemorations. Guy, thanks for joining us. Can you tell us what's happening there?
So we're getting ready now for the main event, really, which is the burial of 7 people in Potocari Cemetery. I'm just across the road from Potocari Cemetery at the moment, just outside the Srebrenica Memorial Centre. And the reason why we're burying 7 people in Potocari Cemetery this year is they've been identified over the course of the past year, because hard as it might be to believe, 30 years on from the Srebrenica massacre, around 1,000 of those 8,000 victims still haven't been identified. Their remains haven't been found, or if they have been found, they haven't been matched to the names of one of the victims. Every year we get a few more victims who are identified thanks to DNA testing, thanks to people finding items of clothing or personal belongings that somehow match remains to the person who died in July 1995, and they're laid to rest at Potocari Cemetery. Before the burial, which is happening around lunchtime, there'll be a a commemoration at the Memorial Centre, and we'll hear all sorts of dignitaries from around the world giving speeches. We've got members of the royal family of the UK, we've got the Prime Minister of Croatia, and we know pretty much what they're going to say. It's going to be the usual lines, that the Srebrenica massacre should neither be forgotten nor repeated, which is, of course, the correct thought to have. But it doesn't really reflect, as you said, Georgina, the ongoing divisions in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and those divisions only seem to be deepening.
Well, so tell us how politicians are using this situation to stoke divisions.
So I'll give you one example. I spoke to a Bosnian Serb minister who's in the state-level government, and Bosnia's government is complicated. It's split down the middle on ethnic grounds. You've got two regions or entities. One is called Republika Srpska, which is majority Serb. The other one is called the Federation, which is where most of the Bosniaks and Croats live. Right now, we're in Republika Srpska, which is where Srebrenica is situated. And I spoke to this minister who is in the state-level government, but he is an ethnic Serb, and he's a big ally of the Bosnian Serb leader Milorad Dodik. And he was not very happy at all about the fuss that's made over Srebrenica, over the commemorations. He's saying that it's all about the Bosniaks, and they're the victims, and they don't want to acknowledge that anybody else died in the 1990s, that Serbs who died around the Srebrenica region don't get any injustice. And as we were driving into Srebrenica this morning, you go through a town called Bratunac, and there are placards with photos on them at the sides of the road, and these have faces on them of Serb people who died between 1992 and 1995. Now, this isn't the only thing that's going on, though. We've had a lot of agitation, secessionist agitation, from the Republika Srpska government in recent months, and they've been trying to withdraw from state-level authorities. And recently, they even passed legislation setting up a so-called reserve police force. Now, for people who were around in the 1990s, this is really very worrying, because that was the name of one of the militia groups that carried out all these murderous acts back then. So it's really something which brings people right back to the terror of the 1990s. Now, I spoke to Mirela Osmanovic, who was born 2 years after her two brothers were murdered at Srebrenica. And these days, her family have returned to live in the area, and she works at the Memorial Centre.
The fear and the emotions that we felt in that moment, and I have to say that we are working in a very specific environment, because all of the people that we are working with are either survivors or second generations of the families. And that kind of intense atmosphere that was given and produced by Republika Srpska and their leaders really disturbs us in some way, that we are not that kind of protected anymore, and we are really worried about our future. My parents were really worried of what will happen, because that was so re-traumatizing for them, and it all looked the way it looked in 1992. So I have to say it is really re-traumatizing, not just for the survivors, but also for their families as well.
Now, Guy, the ultimate authority in Bosnia and Herzegovina is still the International High Representative. What does he have to say about the situation?
So the current International High Representative is Christian Schmidt. People might remember, 20 or so years ago, people like Paddy Ashdown taking a very active approach towards their role as High Representative, sacking government ministers and so on and so forth. Christian Schmidt hasn't been doing that, but he has been at loggerheads with the Bosnian Serb leader, the Republika Srpska president, Milorad Dodik. And he's been using his powers to annul this secessionist legislation we've been talking about. Mr. Dodik has been convicted of ignoring the High Representative, but Mr. Schmidt says that Dodik and his allies are playing a dangerous game.
This is dangerous, playing with the memory of those who have been experienced the 1990s. I see the unresponsible part of the political class just playing with this. And this needs as well a clear presence of the international community on military level. So EUFOR Althea gets more responsibility just in the sheer presence of promising the people that they kept and supported in a peaceful manner.
So Dodik still has a ban from holding public office hanging over him.
Indeed, he does, because of that conviction of ignoring the rulings of the High Representative. He was actually sentenced to 1 year in prison and given a 6-year ban from public office. Now, that's under appeal, and we're expecting the verdict of that appeal to come through any day now. But as you can imagine, that again has been a power struggle between Mr. Dodik, the High Representative, the state authorities. All of that is still churning on. And to talk about reconciliation in Bosnia and Herzegovina, with that background and with people coming to the commemoration at Srebrenica today, it does seem like something of a distant hope at this point.
Guy, thank you very much indeed. That's Guy Delaunay in Srebrenica for us. Now, still to come on the programme, it's time to find out what we learned this week.
We learned that among the many things far more interesting to Trump than any list he very definitely isn't on is diplomacy, and we learned that he was especially intent on outreach to Africa.
This is The Globalist.
Craft is a matter of perspective, a unique outlook, an obsessive attention to detail. With UBS House View, you get the big picture in bite-sized articles, delivered daily and curated by over 200 globally connected, locally active analysts, all focused on identifying the latest investment opportunities and market risks to help you achieve your financial goals. UBS. Banking is our craft.
This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio. The time now in London, 7:21, and I'm joined in the studio by Vincent McAviney, political broadcaster and commentator, to have a look through today's newspapers. Good morning to you, Vinny.
Good morning.
You're looking very summery.
Yes, it's been a very warm few days here in London. We're in a heat wave, which I think we're going to get to in a minute.
Yes, absolutely. I think we do need to talk about that and how we're dealing with the heat. But first of all, how is Europe dealing with the fact that Keir Starmer and Macron have made this deal, a migrant deal?
Yeah. So President Macron has been in the UK for 3 days now. He's concluded his trip, and we had all the sort of royal pomp and pageantry on day one, addressing Parliament, the big ball, and then the last 2 days they have been locked in Downing Street, trying to work out what they can announce in this deal, and they are describing it as groundbreaking in a press conference they did yesterday afternoon. And essentially what we will see is a pilot which the UK government wants to ramp up as quickly as possible to try and bring in deterrence to anyone trying to cross the channel. Just yesterday, we had between 250 and 300 people in one day crossing. This is going to be the peak season. The sea is flat. The wind is calm. It's the easiest to cross with the climate. So we're already at about 50% higher this year than we were at the same point last year. So it is ramping up again. Some people saying this is because they got rid of the Conservatives' Rwanda policy, which, although it only transported 4 people, was a deterrent. What this would do is, in Keir Starmer's mind, is sort of smash the working model of the gangs, because 1 in, 1 out would mean anyone who crosses the channel would not have the right to stay and be processed. You would be sent back to France, and in place, France would send someone who has a legitimate claim of asylum in the UK and has family members here. Now, they're going to do it, we think, for around initially 1 in every 18 people who come, but they're not wanting to go too into the numbers, but they think that they can, if they get past the legal challenges, which are inevitable, both here in the UK and potentially from other EU members, that this will be an effective way of just completely shutting down this stream of people coming in, and would also sort of re-legitimise the idea of asylum being for those in need, not those who are just paying for it every day crossing the channel.
And of course, EU countries don't like it because these people would be returned to France, but then returned to wherever they originally accessed the continent.
Yes, that's right. And particularly, of course, the Mediterranean countries aren't happy about that idea. But then at the same time, they're making arguments that 1 in 3 migrants crossing Europe anyway is trying to get to Britain, and Britain needs to de-incentivise this. Well, this would be a big way of Britain de-incentivising it. Policies like not being able to access things if you do cross illegally, not being able to sort of make an asylum application, not being able to access sort of welfare parts of the deal currently that they are enjoying. There is this question which has been really interesting. The UK is an outlier in European countries in that we don't have any form of national identification card. And that is something which we dabbled with at the end of the new Labour government in 2009, 2010. Gordon Brown had got that up and running, but the Conservatives came in and cancelled it. But it does mean that, when people now here in the UK want more control over who can access the NHS, tighter controls over welfare spending, knowing who is working in our economy, because there is a big black economy, and these people crossing the channel, we think, are getting into jobs within, 1 or 2 weeks in cities, working as Deliveroo drivers, doing all this. And we're seeing a huge rise in accidents on our roads, particularly from bikes and e-bikes. And that might be because these people aren't quite used to working in sort of British traffic systems and obeying signals. So there is an argument growing now in the UK as well to bring in these ID cards, because it will be a disincentive to people to come here, and will crack down on any kind of fraud that people particularly caring about this issue want to stamp out. Yeah.
Now, we were talking about the heat, and I think we should talk about air conditioning.
Yeah, this is a nice piece in the FT by an old university friend of mine, actually, John Byrne Murdoch, who, no relation, has to be said whenever you raise his name. He is writing about the European need increasingly for aircon, which has kind of been a bit of a dirty word in Europe. You don't get much air conditioning. And he cites the late Singaporean Premier Lee Kuan Yew, who was asked about the secret to his nation's rapid rise in the 20th century. And he said, first, multi-ethnic tolerance in a diverse society. Second, air conditioning. And that if you look at all rates of work in offices in particular, at 21 degrees is basically the optimum temperature. Once you start getting above that, performance is impacted. This is seen in people taking tests. Once you sort of also factor in people sort of sleeping in those higher temperatures, then you get poorer outcomes from workers, but also it starts to really affect heat. Once you sort of raise above 30 degrees, people start to really struggle. And if you go back over the last sort of 25 years, Europe has had about 80 to 90,000 excess deaths from heat, whereas America has only had 20,000. And that is because of indoor heating. And if you look at these charts that he's pulled out, he's compared a range of European cities. And so let's take, for instance, Barcelona versus Los Angeles. Once you cross that 30-degree line, you have this massive spike in excess heat deaths. You have this played out pretty much in every example that he has given of European cities to American ones. And it's that, inside our homes, people are having to spend more time because we're having more heat waves, but these properties aren't good at cooling themselves down. So he's saying using new technology like heat pumps, which actually can both heat and cool and don't put out require the energy output that we've traditionally said in Europe. We don't want to, drain energy to cool things down. It's because the weather patterns are changing. We might need to reevaluate this and sort of alter our prejudices about air conditioning.
Finally, the Bayeux Tapestry.
Yeah, this is a really interesting story. So a successful part of President Macron's trip, which I think we can all agree is, this one is indisputable. The Bayeux Tapestry, which all British school children, when they hit high school, secondary school, history classes in Year 7 start with 1066. It is basically the start of British modern history. It's when William, Duke of Normandy, came over the Channel to Hastings, talking about boat crossings, although he came with a pretty big army behind him. He invaded, he took over the British crown, and that was the last invasion of Britain. And obviously the Bayeux Tapestry, which we believe was sewn by English seamstresses, depicted this. It was used to decorate the cathedral in Bayeux, but it's now been in its own museum since the 1980s. That museum has to undergo some substantive renovations, and so the Bayeux Tapestry is going to come here to the British Museum for at least a year from, we think, July 2026, and it will be displayed here. It is the first time in around 1,000 years it will have been back in the UK after its creation, which it's thought happened here in Britain.
Right. I think you're missing the main bit of the story.
The main member of the story.
Which is that apparently there are embroidered in the tapestry, or at least in the original, but not in the reproduction, are at least 93 penises, some on horses and some on men.
Well, it's good they made that child-friendly version in the reproduction because there's a lot of phalluses on display.
No, but it is extra. I mean, there's quite a serious debate about exactly how many there are and whether some of them might in fact be swords.
Yeah, a very serious academic debate on that one. But no, it is a bit of a triumph, really, for the British Museum. This has been talked about since 2018. Emmanuel Macron first proposed it then. It had a bit of a backlash in France. They were saying that it wasn't in a good enough condition to travel. They've had to come up with a way of doing it. But it was going to have to be moved out anyway whilst this museum reconstruction was going on. But it's going to... I was thinking, like, what is safer? Boat, plane, what do you do with this? But actually, they're going to drive it in a lorry to the Channel Tunnel and take it on the train, on the Eurostar, and bring it to London that way. So it'll be quite an operation to see how they do this, protecting what is a very historic and important, probably in the UK, I mean, a quarter of visitors that go to it are British people. It's so important to UK history. It is, in a way, it is, I was trying to think of comparisons internationally. It's like seeing a founding, copy of the Constitution in America, really. This is the start of modern Britain, this sort of amazing capturing that survived, the French Revolution, the Nazi invasion, all of this. There is a section that's missing at the end. No one quite knows what happens at the end, although we're still living it, some would say. But maybe there were even more phalluses.
Vinny, thank you very much indeed. That's Vincent McAvenny there, and you're with The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Now, here's what else we're keeping an eye on today. Donald Trump says the US will slap a 35% tariff on Canadian imports from August, up from the current 25%. He's warned it could rise even further if Canada retaliates, though key sectors like energy and United States-Mexico-Canada agreement-covered goods remain exempt. Former Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has been jailed again, accused of trying to impose martial law late last year. He faces charges that could carry the death penalty and is being held in solitary confinement as the country battles a heatwave. And a vintage Hermes Birkin bag has sold at Sotheby's for a staggering £7 million, smashing auction records. The 1985 prototype, once owned by Jane Birkin herself, was snapped up by a private Japanese collector. This is The Globalist. Stay tuned. Now for a look behind the headlines. Here's Monocle's Lisbon correspondent Gaia Lutz on how Portugal's seaside town of Comporta has become an even dreamier destination.
Comporta has long been a favourite of Lisbon tastemakers and international crowds in search of an off-grid summer on the Atlantic. But now, between swims and long lunches, there are more reasons to linger. 2 exhibitions open today for the summer season, bringing a taste of the international art world to the town. Blinded by the Light marks the 5th annual summer show by Brazilian gallery Fortes da Loia e Gabriel in Comporta. This year, in collaboration with fellow Brazilian gallery Mendes Wood. The exhibition brings together artists including the British Carathan Evans, Antiguan painter Frank Walter, and Brazilians Janaína Chapi, Érica Versucci, and Laís Amaral. Held in a converted rice barn that has served as a cultural centre in the region since the 1960s, Fortes da Loia e Gabriel Summer Show has been a mainstay since launching in the pandemic years in 2021. It confirms a genuine appetite for contemporary art in the region. Among those newcomers is Porto and Lisbon-based Cubic Gallery, returning for a second summer at the Museu do Arroz, another cultural space making use of Comporta's heritage of rice production. With views onto the bright green paddies, Ambient Threads, a group exhibition featuring gallery artists and invited names, features art that subtly reflects its tranquil setting and the needs to preserve the ecosystem. From Monocle in Lisbon, I am Gaia Lutz.
Thanks to Monocle's Gaia Lutz, and for more from Monocle's editors and correspondents around the world, do sign up for our free daily newsletter, The Monocle Minute, at monocle.com/minute. It is 16:33 in Sydney, 8:33 in Zurich. Australia has announced a sweeping new strategy to tackle a dramatic rise in anti-Semitism, following a reported 300% increase in incidents since the war in Gaza began last October. Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has been handed a 49-point action plan by Special Envoy Gillian Segal. Among its more hardline proposals, stripping government funding from universities and cultural institutions that fail to act on anti-Semitism, tightening visa screenings to exclude people with anti-Semitic views, and stepping up media monitoring. Well, I'm joined now by Alex McKinnon, a journalist based in Sydney. Alex, thanks for coming on the show. What's the broader context here? Why has anti-Semitism become such a flashpoint in Australia, and how widespread is the issue?
That's a very good question, and it's one that we don't really have an accurate answer to. As you said in the intro, there has been a reported increase of anti-Semitic incidents of over 300%. It is true that in Sydney especially, there have been a number of anti-Semitic attacks. There have been graffiti and vandalism levelled against synagogues. There have been several attempted arsons, things like, Nazi imagery painted near synagogues and near schools, that sort of thing. The reason that the response to it is so contentious, and the reason why that figure of 300% is not entirely accurate is because the conflation of anti-Semitism and opposition to Zionism or opposition to Israel's genocide in the Gaza Strip is one that is very, very strong in Australian politics and in the media. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I just wondered what the main features of the anti-Semitism plan are, and it's been very contentious. What are people finding particularly worrying?
So the main reason why this is so contentious is because it seems to be quite a transparent attempt to essentially criminalise protest activity or expressions of solidarity with Palestinians and protests against Israel. Despite the fact that there is no evidence really that these anti-Semitic attacks are being carried out by, pro-Palestinian protesters or, anti-Zionists or anything like that. Most of these, in fact, I think it might be all of these anti-Semitic attacks that have been happening in Sydney over the last kind of 6 to 8 months. It was found a few months ago that the organisations behind them, they were actually being committed by organised crime groups. And the reason that these organised crime groups were, paying people to go and scrawl swastikas on synagogues and things like that was to distract law enforcement away from their own activities. There was a very infamous incident now of a caravan being discovered on the outskirts of Sydney, packed with explosives and with a notebook containing, anti-Semitic slurs and apparent, a list of supposed targets, synagogues and things like that. And it was found later that the caravan was essentially planted there by an organised crime group. The explosives were about 40 years old and not really good for anything. And they had done this in order to better negotiate with the police about, to say to the police, well, we've got information about a planned anti-Semitic attack, and in return, we'd like you to lay off us. So this fiction that the Palestinian movement or the pro-Palestinian movement in Australia is behind this rise in anti-Semitism has no basis in reality, in spite of what the Special Envoy to combat anti-Semitism or indeed the Prime Minister say.
Alex, thank you. That's Alex McKinnon. This is Monocle Radio. Now, it's Friday, which means Monocle's contributing editor Andrew Muller has been hard at work to recap the past 7 days.
We learned this week that promises made by the administration of US President Donald Trump are of perhaps debatable value.
I can't
Oh my God. Wow.
Okay.
Crazy.
What the
hell? Never heard that before.
Oh my God.
Surprised as you were, etc. We learned specifically that Attorney General, at least until Trump fires her and calls her an idiot and a loser who he has at any rate barely ever spoken to or indeed heard of, Pam Bondi, who as recently as February said this about releasing files naming the clients of unlamented people trafficker Jeffrey Epstein.
It's sitting on my desk right now to review. That's been a directive by President Trump.
Had completed her review and discovered that the list of Epstein's clients was in fact not on her desk or indeed anywhere else.
Donald Trump and his administration is today left holding the bag after a conspiracy theory that has animated and juiced his base and fueled the rise of multiple key members of his innermost cabinet suddenly and spectacularly imploded.
We learned, yes, that there never was any such list. Don't know where anybody would have got such an idea from, and that, furthermore, that really none of this is that big a deal anyway, and everyone should just stop going on about it, honestly. And we learned this on the obviously unarguable authority of someone who Epstein himself once called his closest friend.
Are you still talking about Jeffrey Epstein? This guy's been talked about for years.
We learned, in fairness, that the president had far, far more pressing concerns.
The only question is, will I gold leaf the corners? You could maybe tell me my cabinet could take a vote. You see the top line moldings.
And are we not all, in a very real sense, wondering whether to gold leaf the corners of the top line moldings?
I think so.
Anyway. We learned that among the many things far more interesting to Trump than any list he very definitely isn't on is diplomacy, and we learned that he was especially intent on outreach to Africa.
Oh no.
From which continent he welcomed several leaders to the White House and dazzled them with both his deeply researched knowledge of their region and its issues and his patient willingness to learn still more.
If I could just say it's, your name and your country would be great. Thank you, please.
We learned that he was especially taken with President Joseph Boakai of Liberia.
Well, thank you. It's such good English, such beautiful. Where did you learn to speak so beautifully? Where were you educated? Where?
Probably in Liberia, where the official language is English, as might be expected of a country founded by black Americans, whose flag is red and white stripes next to a blue panel with a star on it, and whose capital is named after the 5th president of the United States, as you'd reckon all but James Monroe's successors but Trump and perhaps one other would have known, i.e. Millard Fillmore, who was just a total dumbo.
What a fool.
Stupid 13th president. Only carried one state in 1856, and that was Maryland, which hardly counts.
Idiot.
What a loser.
What kind of a name is Millard?
What kind of idiot idea was the compromise of 1850 anyway? Stupid.
Couldn't get nominated for a second term by his own party. What a deadbeat.
You know what? I really don't like him.
We recorded that like 4 years ago and you said we'd never get any more use out of it. Who's wasting everyone's afternoon now, eh? But we learned that there is one African with whom Trump is unimpressed, or at least significantly less impressed than he once was.
But I've never met a nice South African. No, he's never met a nice South African.
Now, the feud between President Trump and Elon Musk is escalating this morning. The president called the world's richest man a train wreck who's gone completely off the rails.
We learned that the reason for this further waning of a relationship which was once as close as that of Abbott and Costello was that Musk had found the time in between turning his AI chatbot Grok into Reinhard Heydrich to found a new US political party to rival the entrenched Republican and Democratic duopoly. And we learned that Musk's new party would not be joining the short list of people or entities who Trump has publicly wished well.
I've met her numerous times over the years, especially since I lived in Palm Beach, and I guess they lived in Palm Beach, but I wish her well.
Which, as of this broadcast, still consists in its entirety of Jeffrey Epstein's principal procurer, Ghislaine Maxwell, currently doing 20 years and who had been arrested shortly before Trump made that statement. We learned, returning to the present day, that Trump believes his former former sidekick's ambitions are impractical.
We can have fun with it, but I think it's ridiculous.
Indeed, imagine an American political party entirely consecrated to the whim of an erratic billionaire with an ego the size of Jupiter, seething in a demented parallel reality, reinforced by an adoring legion of barely literate supplicant rubes whose brains have been eaten by social media conspiracy theories, and imagine American voters electing such an entity. Absurd, could never happen, etc. We have learned, however, that Musk's movement will be called the America Party. That was an eagle. We have not learned which of America's signature colours it will adopt, though with red taken by the Republicans and blue by the Democrats, that only really leaves... And we remain agog to learn whether or not it will go better than most things Musk launches.
3, 2, 1.
For Monocle Radio, I'm Andrew Muller.
Many thanks to Andrew. This is The Globalist on Monocle Radio.
There's a craft to every question, which is why at UBS, we query every aspect of the market, working with specialized experts and award-winning research teams, covering over 3,500 stocks in 50 countries, all delivered in a comprehensive library, answering what you want with what you need. UBS. Banking is our craft.
It's time to look at what's making headlines on the silver screen, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined in the studio by the film critic Karen Krasanovic. Karen, you're looking very good this morning, and I think that's because you, unlike me, declined another Campari spritz at the party we were both at last night.
It was a warm day, but they were delicious, weren't they? Great.
It was lovely being on this central London rooftop, having gorgeous drinks, the sunset and all the rest of it. Wasn't it fun?
It was a beautiful, beautiful party, but I did have to prepare for today.
And so you left early?
I did, yes.
I did notice it. I mean, we caught up before you left, and we talked a little bit about what we were going to speak about today. And then just as you were mentioning the life of Chuck, in walked Chuck.
Chuck.
Our very own Charles Heckers.
Which was great, and it was really nice to meet him because I'd heard him a lot. So, yeah, a nice natter, and he's absolutely delightful. So that was actually very good. It's nice to discuss what you're going to discuss the previous day. So
absolutely.
It makes me feel secure.
So one of the things we established was that you disagree with most of the critics on Superman. They say it's terrible. You say they must have seen a different movie.
You know, I'm not a big fan of Rotten Tomatoes, but in this regard I am, because Rotten Tomatoes is 95-85%, and those are people that have actually seen the film. Now, it's not unusual for critics to be what I call gunslingers. A movie comes out and they automatically have a knee-jerk reaction and say, oh, I don't like it. And they think that that's going to be a fashionable line to take. We all know that time is the test of how good a movie is. I watched Catch-22 the other day in 1970. It was brilliant. It was beaten by MASH back then. But anyway, so I saw it. I didn't expect it much because I'm not a huge fan of the franchise or the character particularly. And I loved it. So, and I took a very cynical friend with me, and he also loved it. So people who are seeing it are loving it, but the critics are somehow bashing it by saying it's woke. Now, I don't think there's any wokeness in it. He's Superman. Picture Superman if he were to come to Earth in real life. Mm-hmm. That's really the premise. And he also has a cute dog.
What kind of dog?
I call it a mongrel terrier. It's a Heinz 57, as we used to say. But he's partially CG, but of course he looks pretty good, and he's a very naughty dog, based on James Gunn's, the director and writer's, own experience of adopting a rescue dog who was very naughty, which I think is delightful.
Wonderful. So I mean, I read a particularly vicious view it was Kevin Maher, I think, in the Times.
Yes.
What's his objection, and why do people hate this movie so much?
Kevin is the lead critic of the Times, and he has to take a cool line. You know, it's not fashionable to like something. It really isn't. It's okay to like something if it's small, if it's indie, if it's just one can or something. But something big like this, number one, James Gunn has had previous successes. So he's already, Guardians of the Galaxy 1, 2, and 3, ran into a little trouble, came out of the backside, and also the other side. And that was a slip of the tongue. I've only had one coffee. And people are taking against superheroes in general. Now, I think it's just a trope. And I'm encouraging anybody, really, when I came out of the film, I said it to at least 4 people, go and see the movie. If you don't like it, I will pay for your ticket. Yeah. Because I really, really was sold on this.
So there's another movie which is 2 female superheroes, or kind of goddesses, I guess, ancient goddesses. But it's also kind of goddesses of the screen, because these are 2 major actresses who come together to make this movie, Charlize Theron and Uma Thurman. Tell us about The Old Guard 2.
The Old Guard. Okay, The Old Guard 1 was Charlize Theron, directed by Gina Prince Bythewood. I always put an L in her name, but it's Bythewood, which was I worked on it, actually. Was a tremendous film. I think it was 2020 it was released, Netflix. It was a great story about immortals and what happens, and can they become mortal, etc. And it was extremely exciting and innovative and unpredictable. And this, The Old Guard 2, which stars Charlize Theron, who also produced it, is something along the same lines. Now, it's got a new director called Victoria. Now, here it would be Mani, but in America it's Mahoney, who's worked her way up. And her backstory is that she came through the Writers and Screenwriters Sundance Institute, and she's kind of really paid her way by doing lots of television and things. And so she was given this, and she says she's grateful because she doesn't have to worry about the box office that James Gunn has to worry about with Netflix. And it unites, Charlize Theron is the good guy, and Uma Thurman as Discord is the bad guy. And of course, there's terrific fight sequences, and we love seeing Uma Thurman fighting Charlize Theron because we know that they both have played massive fighters on screen, and we like to see that.
And in terms of quality?
It's terrible. No, it's actually, and again, I don't like Rotten Tomatoes, but it's got a 25% rating. It should be good, and we'll watch it because of the cast. The cast, wonderful. Some of the design is great, but the direction is just a little quotidian, and I also think that the plot. Now, this was the problem with The Old Guard. The Old Guard had an amazing original script that they changed. So it was good, but it wasn't as good as the original. And I think the same thing happened here. Now, Charlize Theron is saying that the reason it took so long for this film to come out was writers' strikes and pandemic and all this other stuff. I think there are other reasons. And I've watched it. She just looks really unhappy to be there. But it's one of the top watched films on Netflix, so watch it anyway.
Yeah. She recently gave an interview. She was talking about how she's on Raya.
Really?
The celebrity dating.
Wow.
And just talking about how people really just need to learn how to present themselves on Raya, and don't put a picture of yourself with a fish.
No, there's all sorts of things. It's nice to know that dating apps haven't changed. What a relief.
And finally, let's have a look at the life of Chuck.
Okay.
Now,
This isn't coming out until the 22nd of August.
Right. Okay. So we're looking at it now because we're very excited.
Okay. I'm going around telling everybody to see Superman. I'm seeing Life of Chuck next week because I missed the screening, so I was away. Everybody I bump into loves it. Every single critic, hard-bitten critic that I expect, how'd you feel about Superman? I loved Life of Chuck. So it's like, okay, Tom Hiddleston plays Chuck, who it's kind of a Benjamin Button sort of effect. And it's based on a short story by Stephen King. And in fact, Studio Canal is so enthusiastic about this film and it's been giving a slow rollout all over. It's opened in America already. It's opened in other countries already. Slow rollout with this. It's almost like they don't have a lot of confidence in it, but they're giving out the book as well when you go and see it if you're a critic. And it sounds wonderful. It's directed and written by Mike Flanagan, and it's got Chiwetel Ejiofor, just like Old Guard 2, so why not? Wonderful performer. And I don't want to read too much about it, but it's basically has to deal with, okay, I'll just read this out. It's chronicled in reverse chronological order. That's a bad sentence. From his death coinciding with the end of the universe to his childhood.
But apparently, despite all that, it's a feel-good movie.
It's a feel-good movie.
It deals with extinction, but we walk away feeling fab.
He's famous for his dancing. He says, I'm going to live my life until I run out of life.
Stephen King's fantastic book on writing. came out 25 years ago. It's just been reissued with a new little bit about where King is writing about joy in it. And it's absolutely brilliant.
It's one of the best. I've got a first edition of that book somebody gave to me, and it is brilliant if you want to write or even if you don't.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a memoir as well. It's just so good. Karen, thank you so much. That's Karen Krasanovic there, and this is The Globalist on Monocle Radio. Finally today, we meet Charlotte Cardin, the Montreal-born singer and songwriter whose blend of sultry pop, jazz-inflected vocals and confessional lyrics has earned her a loyal global following. With a sound that's both elegant and emotionally raw, Cardin has quietly become one of Canada's most compelling musical exports. Monocle Radio's Fernando Augusto Pacheco spoke with Cardin in our Paris studio about her future music plans and how her track Feel Good became one of the defining songs of this summer.
Feel Good totally has had like a completely new life in the last few months. So actually what's interesting about Feel Good is that I feel like ever since the first demo, it's had so many different lives, because I first wrote that song all in English. And there was something about it that didn't quite stick. Like, I loved the chorus, but there was something about the verses I didn't like as much. So I ended up not putting it on my initial album, 99 Nights. And once we put out the album, I kept going back to that chorus, and I felt like it had something that was really special. And I would like play it for my friends, and they had this like guilty pleasure attachment to it almost. And I felt the same way. And I was like, okay, how about we go back into the studio and we translate the verses and make a bilingual version of Feel Good and make it mostly in French and see if that gives it maybe the edge that I felt it was missing, maybe the touch of originality I felt it didn't have back then. And so we translated it, but it had many, many versions before we figured out this current version that we know. And we ended up putting it on the re-edition of the album, so like the deluxe version of my 99 Nights album. And it kind of, it was a song that is obviously very lighthearted and felt very good when we played it live, and it was just this like very light song, and I kind of needed that in my, I think, in the discography of that album. But it kind of went a little bit under the radar. Like a few radios picked it up and it had a tiny little bit of traction, but like really not that much. And about a year and a half after the release of Feel Good, I performed the song on a show called Star Academy here. So it's kind of like The Voice. It's like a singing competition. And so they invited me to sing my song with one of the contestants. And from there, it just kind of snowballed into a huge TikTok moments. In the following days, thousands of videos on TikTok were using my song Feel Good. And then a few days or weeks after that, all the biggest radios in France really started playing it like massively. And so it really...
You're literally on the top 10 of the French charts.
Yeah, and
incredible.
it's been in the top 10 for the past few months. Like, it's just kind of staying up there, which is such a big surprise and a lovely surprise in my life, because the music industry now goes so fast. There are tens of thousands of songs that are put out every single day on platforms. And so you kind of expect music to have a much shorter life expectancy. And so to see my song kind of blow up almost 2 years after its release is just really encouraging and kind of super exciting for the future.
You make me feel good.
And I think TikTok obviously has some disadvantages, but for that, I think it's special because it can actually help songs that came out years ago have a moment. Like, I think of that Fleetwood Mac song that's been completely discovered by a new generation. Obviously, it always stayed a classic, but you think of Kate Bush, who is now super popular among Gen Zs and all of that, and that's because TikTok has that power to kind of just show songs to a lot of people. And so that's kind of what happened with Feel Good.
And in a way, you leave it in the hands of the fans as well. Is it true the case? So, for example, I've been reading that, before the label said you need to release this as a single, everything was pre-planned. But now when you release a new album, it's kind of the fans will pick the favorite and it will become the organic single, right?
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting. And that's also, the fans are really sensitive and smart, and they're obviously the best way of knowing, what music converts. But now that they have the power on social media, they kind of get that power back, which is really interesting and nice. And so a lot of artists will select singles with their labels and their close circle and then put out the album and be like, oh, wait, actually that the one that I thought wasn't a single is now the single because the fans are directly showing me that that's the one they love. And so that is a really interesting, I think, quality of this era in music.
And this song, I think, for me at least, hit the spot. I think 2025 has been proving to be quite a tough year, geopolitics-wise. It's quite stressy. And I think a song like this, it just hit the spot as well. That's my theory.
Well, thank you. I mean, I think I agree. I think you always need a context for music and art in general to really reach people. And so when I put out the song, it probably just wasn't the right context. People weren't ready to relate to it in the way that I maybe meant for it to when I put it out. And I think that's beautiful because art, you need a context for it. And what's funny about this specific song is that I had been invited on the exact same show, Star Academy, the previous year to sing the same song, and nothing really happened with the performance, and it had come out maybe 6 months prior, and so it was much more fresh, and it just kind of went on under the radar. And now that second time around, same show, I sang it with a contestant this time, which was a little bit different, but still, that's when it just snowballed into this big thing.
And that was the pop singer and songwriter Charlotte Cardin in conversation with Monocle's Fernando Augusto Pacheco in our studio in Paris. And I believe there is a longer version of that interview available, and you can find it on our website. That's all for today's show. Thanks to our producers Carlotta Ribello, Anita Riotta and Ryuma Takahashi, our researcher Henry King, and our studio manager Elliot Greenfield, with editing assistance from Mariella Bevan. After the headlines, there's more music on the way, and the briefing will be live at midday in London. The Globalists will return at the same time on Monday, and over the weekend, I'll be here with Monocle on Saturday, and my guest in the studio is Charles Hecker. We'll be bringing you up to date with all the world's big stories. I'm Georgina Godwin. Thanks for listening.